Nedra Deadwyler guides equitable processes to bring community voices into defining and shaping places and the story of place. She is a social worker, a cultural preservationist, and creative. She centers our humanity, lived experiences, community care, and our beautiful world. She holds a Master of Heritage Preservation from Georgia State University, a Master of Social Work from New York University, and a Bachelor of Social Work from the University of Georgia. She was a scholar in residence in 2021 with the Atlanta Beltline, and Nedra is also a published writer. Everyone, please help me in welcoming Nedra Deadwyler to the short podcast.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming today. It's nice to be here in the archives. I've visited here before, so I'm appreciative of the staff that maintains it and keeps us here in the legislation as well. So thank you, Robin, for the invitation also. I'm excited to be here and also slightly nervous. I do want to acknowledge family, my Aunt Lelia, my cousin Kenya, and friend Samantha from the 𝘗𝘵𝘮𝘮𝘶𝘮𝘴 Museum. So I really appreciate you coming and your support. Today, our topic is case studies on community engagement practices for heritage preservation and public history. Heritage preservation, if you don't know what heritage preservation is, it's like the narratives, the ephemera, the materials, traditions, culture, and public history, the things that you do in public space. So tours, house museums, exhibits, these type of things, or even reenactments, that's public history. And so kind of talking about a little bit of those things today. This won't be a deep dive into particular say episodes or events, but talking through some categorical experiences and some examples around community engagement and maybe some, I would say, tips, not even best practices, but practices that I feel that will offer that community care, invite people into sharing and taking part. I'm thinking about some of the goals of preservation and public history, and what those are for the community's experience and what they're taking away with them. I do want to just do a little bit of land acknowledgement. I just want to acknowledge the earliest stewards and caretakers of the land, the Creek and the Muskogee and Cherokee peoples, and enslaved Africans whose labor and intelligence ingenuity built the basis for industry and wealth in this country. I just hold a lot of gratitude and thanksgiving for that. So
maybe give the mouse on the right side, on the side, the far right side of the screen. If you move the mouse over there.
Over to here?
No. Yeah, sorry. New system, everybody. This is what I mean. Sorry.
And I was in like
So,
okay.
Yeah, there you go.
There we go. And next, here's our agenda. I'm going to try to talk fast so we can get down to the Q&A, but just want some introductions, values, defining community, who is community engagement for, some strategies, what to do when things go wrong, because things will go wrong, thinking of healing modalities, some concluding recommendations, Q&A. So introduction. All of these photos, it's mostly just images from different engagements and events that we've hosted over the 10 years that we've been around. Civil Bikes, it's a heritage tour, biking and walking tours, primarily in Atlanta, and just a couple of different neighborhoods and several different routes and different lengths of the tours that we've taken. And Save Your Spaces, which was, as you saw those logos on that first slide, Save Your Spaces is a skills share around heritage preservation or preservation, so that people who are leading projects or professionals who are in the field are sharing their skill set with community members. You know, heritage, a lot of this, you know, preservation happens in institutions. We're sitting in an archive right now, very thankful for them. Museums, libraries, universities, and some, you know, but that's also, you know, interpretation and narratives is generated from there. And so with the Skillshare, it is giving the community the power to tell their own story, to narrate how they see that best represents them, using a language and identifying places that are more specific and prescient to the story. And so that's what Save Your Spaces is about. So introduction, I'll say the who I am. And I feel like identity, like our identity, you know, it's beautiful, it's miraculous. You know, we're born how we are and who we are. And that is an essential and an important part of the work in how we are leading tours or building installations and exhibits, or, you know, what is the story that we're trying to tell? We tell it from a specific viewpoint. So, you know, I'm from Georgia. My family's been from Georgia since the beginning, both sides. So with that, I feel very attached to this land, you know, very attached to the people and the stories. And I'm always very curious about it. And, you know, have different heritages in my background. So I also grew up with my family. I have family here today, extended family on both sides. My father's family's from Northeast Georgia. My mom's family is from Middle Georgia. So I grew up hearing stories, grandparents, uncles, great aunt and uncles, like in the family. All of that was a part of how I grew up, how I understood and oriented myself to the world. And so that experience guides me today. And so it's through that how I filter and understand history, and also what I'm inviting people in. Going back to our identities are important. So I have personal stories that I can share and stories that I have heard over my lifetime that I bring into the work. And I feel that that is like the base that I stand on. So, you know, this work, preservation and public history, yeah, it's work, but it's also culture keeping. It's sacred. You know, it's not something that's just like for a job or for earning money. It's something that, you know, it's passing something from one generation to the next. And without it, we have nothing. You know, in the African tradition, that's considered to be called Sankofa, that practice indigenous 7 generations back before. You know, it's in all of our experiences of tradition, passing things on. So culture keeping is a way of life. It gives me purpose. It helps me wake up in the morning. And the community engagement is the maintenance of that culture. Without bringing and inviting people into understanding, without inviting people to see themselves and the stories in it, there is a disconnect and it's lost. We have a lot of history that's forgotten. We have stories that did not get passed down. So being able to reconnect, to find connection, that is the purpose of everything. So my work is about fostering human connection and building community. And you can see here, we're sitting at a table having food. There's no better way to build community than eating. And the categories of my work has been heritage tourism, biking and walking tours, mobility justice, what happens when you're biking and walking in public space. Depending on your identity, it can be really negative. You know, if you're Black and brown, more likely to have encounters with police and/or be hit and killed. Sorry to bring in crash data, but that has also been on the rise post-COVID. We're not really post-COVID. Advocacy for wellness, community care, understanding, decriminalization, how, you know, thinking of histories and lived experiences of Black, Indigenous people of color, immigrant and refugee people, LGBTQIA plus, gender expansive folks, you know, just diverse of people, bringing those stories and narratives. I do not embody all of those experiences, so I invite people to join me, and plenty of people have joined me over the years. And then the advocacy for preservation justice, which I talked about earlier, which is Save Your Spaces. So I would just say, like, it's important to acknowledge your identity, how you show up to the work. That's very important. And also understanding how you can best facilitate those goals. And again, it's kind of leaning on your lived experiences. Values are a huge part of doing anything. And specifically, I would say just, it's an essential part of being a part of the world, but it also guides the work as well. So, what are your values? What is your values towards yourself? Your behavior, your responsibility, in addition to the professional ethics, and how you're treating people on the tours and in the community. We primarily have been in public space, like I said earlier. So we have been on sidewalks. I've had people who are not a part of the tour join in the tour, want to walk along with us. I've had people who live in the community that want to share their stories and also give opinion. I've had people tell us to leave, so there's been some confrontation. There's been a lot of experiences, but if my value is that, I want you to be, you are a part of me, you're a part of my community that I'm building and seeking to have and hold, then I'm going to invite you to express. I'm going to invite you to share. And people aren't turned away, even if it's something that's uncomfortable. And I will talk about a situation where it became very uncomfortable. And then another value that I hold is that history is embodied. Yeah, you can read something in a textbook, you can go to an archive and look at all these primary documents, which are important and glean a lot of information from. But, again, we hold stories. So bringing your own personal stories into the work, I think is essential. And it's key to encourage people to be able to take in the lessons that you're sharing. Because we can be very information heavy. I have done the thing of going down rabbit holes because of the research that I've collected and just wanting to share it with someone instead of just thinking about it in my own head. And it does get some people excited, but it also can bore others. But by, that tension between and using personal story, in addition to the historical narrative, it also allows people to bring in their own stories, thinking about what they heard, what they experienced in their communities. Because this is tourism, it's local people and folks from other places, other countries. But, there are main streets in every neighborhood. There's been the history of segregation and across the US is a thing. So we all have, scenarios where we have something that is familiar. So allowing space for the sharing or exchanges of, yes, my grandparent was also, my mother was a quilter, or I learned how to quilt, bringing in, these experiences, and also like even the intangibles, the memory. A part of public history is to excite and ignite remembering. And so by doing it in these spaces and bringing in the memories of other people, it also helps to foster this excitement and this energy around our history and our historic spaces. And I will say, because of those things, knowing your values, also, if it is to include people in it, for me, that's what it is. It gives a handle, and it gives people a way to accept, any sort of challenges that they may be having, when we're talking about difficult histories or difficult situations occur on the street. Yeah, so the experience I was referring to earlier, I was with a group of people, and it was a diverse group, people from the US and other countries, diverse racially and even across age. We were talking about a developer who had built a building and named it after a historical person. And I'm just not giving you those details just because, I don't know, that can be a whole nother conversation in and of itself. And this person was walking past, and when they heard the name of this developer, they immediately turned around, and it was like, boom. The group that I was with just stood there because they weren't quite sure what was going on. But I walked over to the person, and but that kind of made them feel like I was trying to make them be quiet, which I wasn't. I just wanted to engage and try to let them know what was going on. But instead, I stepped back, I walked back to the group. He came a little bit closer, and and invited him, or I didn't necessarily invite, I left it open for him to say what he needed to say, to share his opinion about the developer and maybe even the insults of this developer for the community. And after he said what he said, he walked away. But that sort of redirection, what it did for the group, it allowed, it's like our like niceness kind of eroded, and we began to have honest conversation. People talked about the challenges because this organization was really about diversity. It was about creating, like healthier environments. So, we can have honest conversation of who was a part of the group, what sort of opportunities they have for creating change within the organization and redirecting it. And it really helped to like switch. If we're going to talk about the history of, we're in Sweet Auburn, and the figures there who created change in society, then we also have to think about how that impacts us personally, as an individual, as a community, as an organization, et cetera. So it was really impactful, and it's something I've seen the person who organized the group since then, and we have reflected on that on a couple of occasions, because it really helped to reorder and like redirect us. And I think it was an opening for understanding that history in a different way. So, yeah. So values are an important thing. Who's being empowered, what sort of systems are being challenged, what are we opening, what are we changing? I would say heritage tourism, public history in and of itself, heritage preservation in and of itself is not the solution, but it can be a route to creating solutions. And I've been able to use it in a different ways. Most city officials, and so they're now called Propel, but then they were Atlanta Bicycle Coalition, and Civil Bikes got together and the Department of Public Works on bike tours. We did a series of this in different areas of downtown to point out infrastructure challenges for bicycles. The thing that happens with a lot of folks who are designing things they may just use a car. So if you're riding down the street and you're going over a grate, it does not interrupt your your ride necessarily. But if you're on a bicycle, it can be really dangerous. Your wheel can get stuck and throw you off. There are various ways that, infrastructure, it's dangerous. So we took them on tours, and it gave them a different perspective of the infrastructure, where it's placed, how it's designed, and some changes. And so that's one way where tours can help create change. Another way that we've used tours, we did a community-led tour where I worked with a community recently in the past year, where we designed a tour, and it was for community members to talk about the history of the neighborhood, but also to express their concerns. We invited like small business, who else? Some nonprofits, different organizations to come and join and to listen. And, that was an opportunity to empower community to speak to the change they wanted to see and talk about some of the historical, another picture of their neighborhood where we know that a lot of times when you hear about Black communities on the news, it is like crime, is poverty, it's something very negative. But having lived in a Black community before, that's not how it is when you're living there. There's so much more that happens. So being able to give some interpretation to the history, it makes a huge difference to talk about the arc of how things have changed and how they got to where they are. So, that is still an ongoing project in the sense of what's going to happen in that neighborhood, but finding ways to empower community to talk about their story, to create change they want to see. Tours are a great way to do that, or exhibits, So preservation is just like a tool it can be a tool for remembrance, but it's also a way to bring people together and galvanize, and also to create changes in the world that we live in. I would say, the other aspect of community engagement too is just defining, simple thing of defining community. Who are you there to serve? And for me, that starts with, thinking about my own identity, and because that's the story that I know best. And it took me a long time to understand that I can't serve everybody. Everybody can come and be a part of it, but who I can really help to create change for is going to begin with people who look like me. And so in my mind, it's who am I shaping this material around? Whose story is coming through with this? So thinking again, going back to who are you, that helps you to define who the community is, who's being centered in your work. And because we all have biases, it's we can only have intimate knowledge and understanding of certain things. And so who and be connected and attached to. So being able to, and also just recognizing, using the word embodiment, it's a word that's being used today because we're acknowledging, I think more people are acknowledging that we try to put on this veneer of everything's okay, or I have made it, or I'm a professional. And we can be all those things, but we're also, on the backside, or our real selves, we bring a lot of things to the table. And so being able to use all of the parts of our being into what we are doing, I think that is what keeps the public history fresh. It keeps people interested. It also is inviting. It's not saying that it has to be done this way, or else it's a fail, because that's also, not the case. But it's also great to learn how to scaffold a tour, right? And have objectives, but to also have enough flexibility to be okay if that goes off the rails, if you don't meet those objectives. It is okay, because it's really about the people that are there. That's the most important thing. Yeah. So the flexibility, the listening to what people are asking. There are a number of times where I've adjusted the tour just because, especially with young people, when they're curious about something, you want to follow their curiosity. So trying to take them to a place or space where, especially if they watch TV or movies, so trying to stay with the interest of the group, I feel like that is also helpful. So having enough robust stories that gives you some flexibility of place. And most stories were not just in one location anyway, the built environment, seeing it holistically, everything is connected, and being able to tell these interwoven connected stories, it really allows, again, it's just it makes it more relaxed, and it keeps people interested. And I would say, slowing down, dropping the agenda, and just really being present with who you're with in your group. And just also understanding that the people who, well, folks who come on, so the other part about identity, having your community together, like it also helps you with the tone, design of the project, whatever that is, that you're using the language that is most important, and that you do identify, like have some identified objectives. Whether you meet them or not is another story. Knowing that the audience who comes on the tour itself or the experience, whether it's an exhibit or it's a reenactment or whatever the engagement is, they're going to have they're having their own agendas, right? Like, yeah, they're going to come and see you. They want to hear what you have to say. They want to be in this place, but they have their own agenda. I've had parents bring their children for rites of passage, and that it's like, oh, this needs to be a different type of conversation, and also need to allow the parents to ask their children, them to bring their stories of that 13, 14-year-old, their 13, 14-year-old selves into the conversation, because there's like a bridge that as a non-parent and as not their parent, I just need to be a part of the facilitating and creating the space, a space of safety, a space of providing some historical references, but this whole event was about the family and their experience. And then also conferences, affinity groups, they have their learning goals. I had a group of, it was kind of weird. There were a group of communication experts, and they came on the tour and talk about language, and you talk about using precise and exact language. I learned a lot from that tour, right? And then with school groups, it's also a very different thing. Walking with children or biking with children in a city, it means that you may have a safety talk with adults in the beginning, but throughout the time, you're talking about safety, you're talking about the built environment. So, it's like, what's important? Well, the built environment where this history took place is very important. Where we are and how it has shaped where we are now, what they see, what they experience, why the streets are designed in a certain way versus to get traffic through versus coming in and like, hey, sit for a while. That whole design aspect is something to impress upon a young person's mind, safety, because if you're talking about how infrastructure needs to be adapted for all people, young people, children can give you a lot of guidance, because what feels safe to them is very different from what feels safe to an adult who can navigate the street. So, it changes like what is all on the table for discussion when you're talking about young people. I just have to call this house out. This is Grace Towns Hamilton's house. And if anyone knows who Grace Towns Hamilton is, okay, yeah. So she was the first Black woman elected into the legislature of the Georgia legislature. And this is her house. It's beautiful, but it was covered in vines and overgrown. And it took a simple phone call, an email, and that email led to, I'm sure, a phone call to get the vines taken down. And now the house is, I won't say the house is taken care of, but at least it's not overgrown and being destroyed by vines. But it's in the west side of Atlanta, and it's really beautiful. I was kind of distinguishing like community, and versus like who, and trying to distinguish who community engagement is for. So, and we talked about a little bit about that. But just a couple other things I just want to add. And like the difference is, again, it's like who comes on the tour or who you're designing this for, who is coming in to take part. And, it's the general public, but it's also very specific groups, kind of like I was saying earlier. And I would say, the strategy with that is just being very clear, being authentic, being your authentic self, being personable. You want to invite people to come in and share their stories. You want to give them a lever, something a handle that they can grab so that they can take in the information and use it for their, have their own encounter, right? History is important. It's great to remember. I don't know, I'm terrible with numbers. So remembering dates of things I may not always remember, but to understand the power dynamics or the situation or how this changed, it's very helpful to be able to hear these, hear these stories, create an opportunity for people to engage it, make their own observations, to build a bridge to their own connection. And I would say for me, that's what the community engagement with tours is about. It is about creating an opportunity for people to come in and to have a bridge of connection to a place, a bridge of connection to a scope of history that they didn't have before, or to have a reconnection. For people who have moved away from the South and have come back, that's an important thing, because if you grew up in the Northeast, or Ohio, or in California, I've lived in New York, I've lived in Seattle, it's very different. It's not the same whatsoever. Cultural norms, all the things, it's so different. So being able to get reacculturated to the South and Southern story, Southern landscape, there's so many ways to use it. And I will say, the word code switching is now back in public life. And I will say, I try not to code switch as much, although it does happen, but really speak to everyone as if they were like me, they look like me, they have my experience, because that way, I think it brings people in a way that maybe they've not been brought into. I'm not trying to cater and to adapt it where things are sanitized. I really want people to have some authenticity to me and also to the place. And I would say the last part about community engagement is that everyone wants to see themselves in the story. They want to see themselves as being their story to be in this historical place. So, the community engagement, again, is just an opportunity to bridge those connections for folks so they can understand their stories better and different. I will say, my aunt is here, my grandfather, in his professional life, he worked at Atlanta Life Insurance Company. He talked about it all the time. I didn't understand the immensity of Atlanta Life Insurance. I didn't understand when he talked about it. I was like, oh, you work there. That's great. You had it, this is your job. But reading history, I had the opportunity to learn how Atlanta Life allowed Black people, men and women, to have a middle income wage, and to be able to buy a house and to be able to have self sustainability, to feel some dignity and pride what they would bring into other Black people. And so it was, it really opened up my eyes to the immensity of what the pride that he experienced in himself for being able to play this role in Middle Georgia. And then, this is another built environment piece, which is very significant. And if I'm not going to say too much about it, but there's symbols built into the walls and symbols in the handrails, and those are Adinkra symbols, which are African symbols that are, I would say they basically give a blessing, and they hold a lot of meaning. So, and you have to see the full immensity, the full picture to see what this design is about, but it is telling you a story, a very big story in a very specific way. So the built environment is very important. Public art is very important. Some strategies for outreach, and again, this work is about stimulating connection, especially to my work primarily has been in disinvested, undervalued communities. So especially in a time of gentrification, new people need to know where they're moving to. And instead of just wanting to change it, to say like, we are a part of this story. We don't have to have a new story, because the story that's actually there is great. We just need some attention. Are we making the story more known? Are we challenging power, the status, we're trying to change the status quo? For me, as I'm still a social worker, so a lot of my work is always about change, is always about trying to create better opportunities for community. And so it means challenging for the status quo. In our tours, I'm going to say it's complicating the narrative. So yeah, there's a historical narrative, but we're talking about the built environment and how ratchet, it is, how it needs to change. It's problematic, it's unsafe. You can't walk down the sidewalk. I'm a klutz, so I easily trip on sidewalks. I'd rather walk in the street. So that's a safety issue. We talk about housing. I've had housing advocates join to talk about more in depth and specifically about housing, zoning changes that need to take place. So complicate things a little bit. It's a great opportunity to be able to see the historical arc of these issues around housing. Housing's went from being Victorian, Queen Anne, to subdivided into apartments, and now they're back to, single family housing. How did we get single family housing? Why is it, what is the history of housing? There's a history. All of these are like, they call them taste. It's all around taste, right? Goals and city goals and the political, all these things kind of preferences, it changes over time. So, so being able to talk about housing, especially when we're in, have an issue with housing right now, a challenge with housing, enough housing, it's good to be able to complicate the narrative a little bit. So I would say the other thing about it is you can't tell everything on a tour. I've tried, and you lose people, it gets boring. And then I've had people where we've talked for especially one-on-one tours, man, those are the longest, 4 hours. It's ridiculous. I'm tired, I want to go to sleep. I'm really an introvert, for real. But, the ways I leave tours a lot of time is that I will email people a one-page document, and it has links. So if they want to go learn more, they can go and learn more. So, the tour, because sometimes, like I said, things get off track. Even if you go the whole route, you may not talk about all the things you wanted to. So being able to give those people who want to learn more or who want to refer back to something, give them those pieces. And then a lot of times, there's music. I've tried to play music on a tour, and it's hard when you're in the built environment. Try to play talks or brief little things that is interesting and would add to it. I've shared quotes, we take turns reading different quotes, just different ways of, I can't say that we song, but there's some catchy music that it's really helpful because it brings in the spirit of that history. So I will put those type of things into the one-page document because it makes it more alive. I am just one person, and I don't have an AV system with me on a tour, so you can't. But they can have, I guess, more closer to this more well-rounded history when you do that. Happens when things go wrong. Yes, we choose to evolve, right? That's what we hope with everything, is that we all choose to evolve. But things go wrong. And I have a situation right now where it got off track, and it got off track with communication. divergence from expectations of our roles. So I will say that, in this work, especially if we're working with other people, you're collaborating, is to always, one, what are your values? What are you bringing to the table? Who are you? Knowing your client and the community that you're serving, where is there some mutual benefit, creating opportunity for mutual benefit, inviting people to share their stories, but having that mutual respect, the co-creation, having some boundaries, and, again, the communication, even with the invitation, well, not invitation, but signing up to come, there's so much communication that has to take place around that beyond logistics. And I would say with the communication group, there was a lot of communication that took place, even how we're going to communicate, right? So it's, everybody is very different in what they need. But being able to be, I think, flexible, open, and empathetic enough to be able to allow, to really allow us to get to where we're trying to go. I think that flexibility is necessary. So things go wrong. Is that when things fall apart? Stopping at healing modalities. I would say, history is really complicated, and just like, today is complicated, everything is tough. And this, in the center of the circle, is a friend named Deep, who I would say is a healing artist. And, this was at our Savior Spaces Festival, and we were doing some breath work and some acknowledgement and just like centering our own selves. We don't always do that on a tour, but some ways to sort of allow, I would say something else about healing too, is just like in historical spaces where spaces have been disinvested and empty buildings, underutilized building, or even trash in the street, right? Or homelessness. These spaces still hold a lot of pride. And I'm thinking of Sweet Auburn particularly because it's something that's near and dear, I will say, to my heart, because I walk through it, bike through it a lot. And I find myself there a lot. And there was a lot of, and I'm working on a project too around a neighborhood that was destroyed by urban renewal. And folks who were displaced and affected by urban renewal many people still have a lot of pain, and a lot of hurt from those experiences. So acknowledging that there was harm in the past, and that harm has, it has a story, and that it's something that continued for a lot of people into the present time. So allowing for the acknowledgement to be a part of conversation, right? And which is sometimes difficult to hear and receive because maybe there's no solution that's going to take place at that moment. But people need to be seen and heard and understood. And that is a form of care, and also allowing those stories to be more visible and a part of the discussion that we have, and that it's not a negative thing, but like if we don't have it there, then we're telling an incomplete story, and we're not even allowing people to be honest about their experiences, creating some shame around that, and it's not necessary. So, grounding ourselves in our values, being confident in our identities, and that our identities are strong enough to be able to care for other people is important. Having opportunity to debrief after a tour is important. Creating a sense of safety on the tour. We are in public space, so I've had people cry on tours, and we had to sit down and just we had a moment, right? So it's because things are difficult, if we're not extending an opportunity for people to be able to be themselves there, then we're doing a disservice. So, you know, there's like that trauma-informedness too, allowing people, like, we're going to talk about, you know, violence or racism, or, you know, if you need to step away, you know, feel free to do so. Taking the time, slowing down, doing some breath work. We typically stop at a cultural space. We've stopped at local businesses. And so being able to step away out of the historiosity, you know, the built environment, also allow people to take a break and reset and, you know, collect their thoughts. So I think I'm going to go to Q&A because we're talked a lot, and then can, like, if we have time at the end, so we can come back to some conclusions. Okay. Any questions or even discussion or situation? Yeah. Penny. Are you asking me if I'm a nonprofit? Yeah. No, I kind of act like a nonprofit. I come from, as a social worker, I worked in nonprofit primarily, and so I'd say we're social entrepreneurs. Yeah.
How would people find out about your talk?
I'm not doing them as much these days, but the website is Civil Bikes, and you can go there. Yeah. Don't be shy. Yeah.
Let me frame the context of the question in regards to the fact that I'm a professional motion picture. I work with libraries and archives across the United States that have film, video, and audio. The truth, if you know, I actually worked for the state archives from 2000 to 2006, an important part of the organization. Over the last 30 years, I have started to reframe how I think about how we tell the story of history, or how we look at archival information. I've narrowed it down to, on one end, awareness, being aware of the community and the stories that it holds. And then on the other end, use. And that use, I tend to think of use as a higher level effort because I've worked with state and federal agencies as well as Hollywood studios. So I kind of look at it as the measurement or the use, not only as putting something on a website, but in how do you elevate it to production use, ways that stories can influence how they could have impact. The first question I have for you would be in regards to the stories that you're telling. Yeah. What is the mission of those stories? Is it to kind of show what the past that we don't have anymore and that evolution, or is it, educational? Is it documentary? What is the purpose of the stories that you tell on these bike rides?
Yeah, good question. And I would say it's been varied. A lot of it is awareness and education. A lot of it is like, if you see an empty parking lot and in some neighborhoods, that means there was a building there and something happened and it wasn't rebuilt, and then why? So it's education, it's awareness, it's trying to build a connection to that place, so that people want to go back. And that's happened. We stop at a local business, people have told me, oh, I didn't know your vitamin lady was there, and they go back there. Or WRD, I didn't know they were there, and they have an event there. So it can help stimulate, not I won't say stimulate, but like people become part of the local economy. Instead of it being a pass-through, it becomes a place where they will stop. They feel like, oh, I'm comfortable. I know this place. I can come back here. Or I didn't know what this building was about. I see it all the time. It's just like, So it's sometimes you have to fill in the color, because it's just an outline. It's just like a backdrop. And people have no clue and they're not even trying to figure it out. So it's just a way to build that connection so that people can take it where they want to or create new possibilities. So
Which is an excellent way to look at the mission.
mhm,
Let's go on the flip side of this. The
Yeah.
second question and final question, open it up to other people, of course. But you mentioned the issues and the challenges of trying to tell a story while you're on the bicycle.
yeah,
Have
that
you?
is a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. On one bump and I would be on, that's what you're saying, right? So the question that kind of resonates in my mind is because I kind of try to elevate use into maybe form,
Mhm,
right? And how we look at sharing the message.
Yeah.
Have you considered at all the ideology or application of developing an app that formulates? And here's this kind of structure, kind of give you a hint. It comes back from this question that was asked a moment ago.
Mhm.
If you were able to formulate a 501c3 nonprofit organization, that means they'd be able to then get funding through grants and fellowships. And when we look at other cities, there's evidence of showing that our apps for walking tours are really important to the community. And there are parts of the agencies like tourism or cultural development that might be interested in exploring this. So I wonder if that's even something that's on your radar.
Yeah, I have thought about it. And there's been like some attempts with some people to make one, but it was like it was free, right? So like using different, and I'm sure like say it was open source, I don't know what they were using. Those platforms might have changed, but my difficulty has been finding one, if you're using archival material, right, you've got to also pay, like there's like the cost maybe that comes with using archival material
Depends.
and footage.
Depends on what
Okay.
you use.
Yeah,
And knowing what that means
yeah.
is something that I've spent since I left the state archives.
Mm,
I've spent a lot of time learning licensing
Mm.
and how people,
yeah, that's the hard part. Yeah, that's a whole like thing in of
And
itself.
the beauty of it, I've been in Los Angeles and other parts of the country
Mhm.
working. I'm now back. And so what brought me here today is to kind of hear what you're doing.
Yeah,
And sounds really exciting. If I
Yeah.
could be of any help, let me know.
okay, great.
Yeah.
And also both of you can share your name, please, so that, I don't know, for posterity.
Oh, me?
Yeah,
Oh, I'm Penny Cliff. I'm at Clayton State University in the Master of Archival Studies program.
that is online. Yeah. And you are,
My name is Lance Watsky.
okay,
I've been honored to work with our cultural heritage in the form of film, video, audio, documents, photographs, and microfilm for at least the last 30 years.
okay, cool.
I know I don't look that old,
Just a baby.
but yeah, we could exchange.
Yeah.
info if you'd like.
That sounds good, yeah.
What area, when you do the biking tours, what area do you cover besides just the Albany Avenue Street?
Mhm. Oh, yes, it's beyond Auburn Avenue Street. We've been in, I would say, throughout the like downtown Atlanta area. We've been on the west side, on Beltline, Decatur. So just kind of basically, but in that, I would say Decatur to lately, I've tried to just stick to like not just the main street, but throughout the Sweet Auburn neighborhood or Main Street on the west side, just because of the interruption that it feels like it gives to community. So, but go up to the Capitol a lot. So it's really throughout the downtown area.
Curating the stories that people offer during your tours?
You said, am I?
Yeah, when people, how are you doing that? How are you preserving the stories that people are telling you as you go on your tour?
Yeah, that's, I've not written down, it's not always, I don't always feel like some of those stories that I can retell. Because some of those stories are personal and I think they're sharing it for the group they're with and just for themselves. So I don't necessarily keep those and write those down. There are some that I do track in terms of people in the community that I will go back and make some notes on. And with the community-led tour, we did write down what we could write down from conversations. And I actually asked people who were of the community that were making the tour to write down what they wanted to say so that we could have it for use later on. But I do practice oral history and I'm capable of recording and transcribing history, but that's, you know, it's kind of like if someone asked me to, yeah.
But they might not be aware that it's
Possible.
shareable. I mean, they might, if they were asked about it, they might say, well, yes, people need to hear what happened to us or what happened in this neighborhood or what happened to them. So I think that if people are asked about it, then there will be more of a chance of an engagement so that you've got more to share and preserve for the history ongoing.
That's a good point. Thank you. Yeah. Someone had their hand up.
Yes. Please allow me to applaud you for the work that you're doing. You're demonstrating that even though you have your master's degree, that education didn't stop there. That every time you get out into the community, that not only are those who are with you learning, but you also set yourself up in different environments, sometimes positive, sometimes negative, if I can understand correctly, that you too are growing and have much more to offer every time that you go out. So please allow me to applaud that. Community engagement, you're definitely showing that you're a part of the community engagement and also the public history. You are definitely endowed on all those counts. So thank you for that. Let me ask, your master's degree, as you were introduced, I heard heritage, but I'm sorry, I didn't have my pencil and paper out fast enough. What is your master's degree in?
Yep. It's in heritage preservation.
Okay, thank you kindly for everything.
That's like it's the non-building related, so.
I sound so good. Thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate the compliment, yeah. Let me ask, get her first, no.
Sorry.
Yes, pronouns are he, they. Yeah, thank you, Rosa. Yeah. Thank you for the presentation. Sorry, I was late. I think that my question is about something that I think I will have caught in the introduction, but I was wondering how you, I guess some of the story around like how civil rights and safe spaces came to be and how you became engaged specifically in wanting to do that work in Atlanta.
Place came from, so I'm from here, but I had moved away for a number of years and I biked and walked, took transit to get to places. But, you know, growing up where I grew up, or I say, you know, it was segregated. I did bus to school. And so, you know, saw another side of town and that sort of thing, right? So being in an environment, even though New York City had enclaves, Seattle also as well, still, you know, went to those places and saw a Chinatown. There was a Chinatown in New York at that time that was pretty expensive. Saw Little Italy, that was expensive. All of these like cultural ethnic neighborhoods that probably were here, but more hidden. And it just made me understand the city in a different way. And so when I came, and then also I moved every year. Prices of rental prices was going up. So I saw Brooklyn become hipsterville, basically. And so coming back to Atlanta, I was hoping that it wouldn't gentrify, right? I was hoping that we could like embrace, understand the neighborhood. Things change, you know, there's plenty of room for more people to live there, but that it could be a different story than like all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's a new neighborhood, right? But it can still have the memory and the history could still be alive. And that's why I started Civil Bikes, just from my experience of what biking and walking did for me to open up where I was, helped me build connection to a place and feel like I belong there. So it's really about belongingness. And Save Your Spaces came from, is because of what you were saying around people want to be able to share their story, have it remembered, documented. And it's like, everybody is not gonna, you don't have to go to school. There are plenty of people doing projects that's not from academic, and you know, it's from their, they're just doing it. They're preserving a cemetery. They're looking up their family's story. They're Uncle Michael with, you know, like holding all of the genealogy, right? So, but sometimes people want to do something for their neighborhood. They want to do something, but they don't know where to start. So just to bring some connection to like human resource, bring it together so people can meet people and see projects, and they could take that interest and go further. And, you know, yeah, people need support. You know, like you're doing something, you don't do it by yourself. And because you do it by yourself, it's tiring, it's lonely, it's frustrating, it's difficult. Like what happens when you run out of, I don't know, energy for it and motivation. Hence, I'm not doing the tours because it takes so much energy and just the organizing and taking bikes places. So it just helps to bring some support to what's going on. Yeah.
Second question. Thank you. My second question, which I think kind of gets to that question of like what you're talking about in support. I'm thinking about or wondering about if there are any like sibling projects or like collaborators that you feel like kin to or in relationship with the projects that you're doing. I think about stuff that I've encountered since living in Atlanta, like especially I remember perennial memory lab with 𝘗𝘰𝘮𝘮𝘮𝘮𝘮, or like I think that's just 𝘗𝘰𝘮𝘮𝘮𝘮 has perennial memory lab. It's more for like personal like archiving, but or I think about Sierra King with Build Your Archive, and just and even to see like your work featured on CCA, and just I don't know, like there's stuff that I'm like, oh, how do all these different cool people do cool stuff locally stuff, and I'm just wondering about if there's any, you know, collaborators or projects that you feel like you're like connected to or that have inspired you either contemporarily or just like across time.
You take.
See
See collaborators. There have been some great collaborators. One, I'll say, Edith has been doing her thing for 18 years. Like now she's retiring. That's the Biracial History Project in Canler Park, and I would say that's a great organization to like look at their work. Sierra King did do something at Save Your Spaces. I think Sierra's her work is phenomenal, and like she's grown, and there are a lot. Tanya DeBose, she's in Texas, and I really admire Tanya. Her family is from Independent Heights, which is in the fourth ward in Houston, and her family helped to build. And she's done a lot of preservation work. She works with the university, have a lot of community support. All the things that she's doing is phenomenal. And there are other like collaborators here from Arkansas. I'm not going to be able to go through a whole list right now, but like, yes, collaborators and that are here that are inspiring for sure. And other places. Yeah. I mean, thank God for social media.
Yes.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. My name is 𝘊𝘰𝘮𝘮𝘮𝘮𝘮, and my pronouns are she and he. First, I want to say I really appreciate I was able to come and listen to you talk about like the work that you do and like the connection with the community, especially because I work in public history and like seeing what you're saying, you know, oh, this is actually really like it's for that inspirational, like possibility model with myself. So something I was thinking about is like what orients you. So for context, I'm from Conway, Florida, and I live in different places like Miami for undergrad, and now Atlanta for grad school. And as I do public history, I like because I've learned more about history in Miami and now I just history of Atlanta. And I knew with my family being from Jamaica, I'm like more Jamaican history now. But I think I don't like know much history that was like local to where I grew up in Conway, Florida. So I'm wondering, as you said, I know you said you lived other places.
Yeah.
What has, I guess, what anchored you or oriented you, and like which areas of history, like in terms of locality, that you focus on?
And I will say family. It always goes back to family. I think that's the reason why I do, because I want to understand our histories more, and also the Black history, and yeah, really get some more grounding, understand like race, understand the political challenges, and how to really create something better in the future. I don't know. I mean, depending on how old you are, it used to be these like, what do they call it? Brotherhood. It was on, I don't know, it was like on PBS, but there were these, they would always have these like, you go to camp, they have kids, multiracial kids coming together and learning, and talking. So it's always these like meeting of the minds. I used to write letters to kids from another country, children of the country. We would exchange letters for a while. So it's always like trying to understand, trying to connect. So for me, that's something I feel like I've been doing my whole life. I bused to school starting in the 5th grade. So coming from the south end of the county to the north end. So like trying to understand, trying to connect, trying to relate. I think one of the challenges of being Black, in America is like, you have to assimilate, so it's like, I assimilated in spaces, but also realized like, I want to be able to connect to my Black identity in a way that is like full and robust, and so, really connect internally, connect externally, and also with kin, so that connection is something that is, I think, yeah, and bridged understanding, because I feel like different communities and groups, even same, there's a lot of disconnect from competition, capitalism, like all of these things, they can separate, but how do we really come back together? Lately, I've had to deal with my own anger from like, it's like the more you learn, like, it's so frustrating. But really, so that healing part is really important. So those are my orientations. And I think kind of what keeps me doing this. And in the past couple of years, just like finding groups like the Highlander Center in Tennessee, like trying to get other skills and connect with other different communities outside of where I'm at, because the world is big. I know, like in Chicago, connected to the Public Housing Museum, they have an oral history corps, and like all these people from different parts of the country doing different things. So meeting different people, learning what they do and how they do it, it just kind of keeps me charged. Hope I answered you.
Yeah.
It's my interiority, but yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.